The estate of Blackwood Manor didn't decay. It simply paused, a breath held for decades, trapping the year 1983 in its dust motes. That was the year Evelyn Blackwood disappeared. Not Jedi disappeared. The local papers, the kind with ink that stained your fingertips, called it a vanishing act, a phrase that sounded far too theatrical for a life-shattering tragedy. Ida S.A.'s story whispered over too strong coffee in the small town of Ames Creek, a story about secrets that curdle in the cold corners of a sprawling house, and a fortune that might as well have been a curse. If you are redrawn into the shadows of old family secrets like this, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of the Blackwood saga. Elias Blackwood, Evelyn's elder brother, found the silk scarf first. It wasn't tossed aside or dropped. It was draped with chilling deliberation over the marble bust of their grandfather in the second-floor gallery, a specific shade of sapphire blue that Elias had gifted her on her 21st birthday. He remembered the conversation, the light glinting off the gold embroidery that spelled out a tiny, nearly invisible in the corner. He didn't call the police immediately. Not Elias. He was a quiet, precise force that had held the Familia-S shipping empire together. After their father, Silas, succumbed to a heart attack, that was likely just a Universia-S way of saying he finished being a terror. Elias' first instinct was to check the hidden ledger. The ledger, kept in a safe behind a loose stone in the grand library fireplace, was where the real Blackwood history was recordita, not the public finances, but the debts of loyalty, the promises broken, and the money moved in the dead of night. He found it gone. The safe was open, the space behind the stone empty. That was the moment the vanishing act turned from a tragedy into a calculated exit. Evelyn hadn't just run away. She had taken the keys to the kingdom. The ledger contained the details of the Blackwood Trust, the colossal $50 million endowment that Evelyn alone, by Silas' twisted will, would inherit on her 30th birthday of 7 years from 1983. It also contained the coordinates of the venture fund, a separate, illicit account no one else in the family knew about, rumored to hold a significant part of the Familia-S liquid wealth, funds that had vanished from the public eye years before. Elias walked out of the library, the heavy oak door swinging shut behind him like the final verdict in a courtroom. His sister, the quiet one, the bookish one, had not only left but had stolen the only thing that mattered to the rest of the Blackwoods, their control. He met Cecelia, his wife, in the long, shadowed hallway. Cecelia was all sharp angles and suppressed ambition, a woman who saw the Blackwood name as a title she deserved, not a burden she married into. She was dressed impeccably, even at this early hour, her silk dressing gown a muted emerald. Elias, she said, her voice a low, perfect pitch. I've called her flat in Boston. No answer. The staff downstairs say she left no note. She didn't leave her flat in Boston. Cecelia, she left here after the annual dinner. She stayed late. She came back to the manor. But why? She hated this mausoleum. She hated the family dinner. She only came because you insisted. The look that said, I know something I wish I didn't. The ledger is gone. Cecelia. The news hit her like a physical blow. Her impeccably composed face cracked, the careful mask of indifference shattering. Gone? Are you certain? The safe is empty. She took the ledger, and she took the key to the trust. But why now? She couldn't touch the principal for 7 years. What game is this? The trust was their only lifeline. The shipping empire, as Elias knew better than anyone, was a leaky ship held together by clever accounting and sheer force of will. Without the trust, the family's prestigia and their way of Lithia would evaporate. I don't know the game, but I know the stakes. You want to control the narrative. I want to protect the family, and I want that ledger back. The investigation started quickly, but went nowhere slower. Detective Marcus Thorne, a weary man with an instinct for lies and a coat that always smelled faintly of rain, took the case. Elias and Cecelia presented a unified front. The grieving, concerned family. They painted Evelyn as fragile, prone to melancholy, and overwhelmed by the weight of the coming inheritance. The scarf on the bust was a dramatic final gesture of a poetic soul overwhelmed by her fate. But Thorne found the details grating. Evelina's room was too tidy. No note, no sign of struggle, no discarded clothes. It looked like Shay D simply walked out into cold night air, wearing the simple black dress Shay D worn to the dinner, and never looked back. But why? Thorne interviewed Theodore Teddy Blackwood, Elias' younger brother. He was the one who had the most to lose if Evelyn took control. Thorne found him chain-smoking on the back porch, staring at the manicured but frigid gardens. "Did you and your sister have an argument, Mr. Blackwood?" Teddy took a long drag. "Evelyn and I never argued. She was the one good thing in this whole house. The one who saw that the Blackwood name was a prison, not a privilege. We drank a small brandy after dinner. We talked about the old days. That was it." "And what did you talk about exactly?" Teddy flicked a cigarette, but into a planter. "About our father, Silas. How much better off we all were with him gone. He was a tyrant detective, a true monster. He broke my mother. He nearly broke all of us. Evelyn was the only one he couldn't touch. Maybe that's why she got the trust." Thorne watched the way Teddy's hand shook as he reached for another cigarette. "Did you see her leave?" "No. I went to bed early. Too much brandy. But I will say this. If Evelyn left, it wasn't because she was fragile. She was ferocious. And if Shay's gone, Ida because she had a damn good reason. And maybe the reason had something to do with something our father did, something she finally uncovered." Thorne wrote Silas Blackwood, tyrant, uncovered secret, in his notebook. He looked back at the house, a dark, heavy shape against the gray sky. He didn't believe in the fragile, poetic soul story. He believed in money, control, and old pain. And Blackwood Manor was drowning in all three. The vanishing act was only the start. A week later, Elias was in his father's old study, the very room where Silas had ruled with an iron fist. He was sifting through Evelyn's personal papers, a desperate hunt for a clue that the police had missed. He ran his finger over Ida, not a tear, but a deliberate gouge. He lifted the blotter, pasted flat against the underside of the wood. Secured with a single, brittle strip of old masking tape was a photograph, not one of the family. It was a small, grainy picture of a woman he didn't recognize. She was young, maybe 20, with a defiant chin and eyes that looked too wise for her age. She was standing on the deck of a trawler, her dark hair whipping around her face, the ocean a cold, limitless expanse behind her. But it wasn't the woman who caught his breath. It was a man standing next to her, his arm loosely around her shoulder, smiling a smile that Elias hadn't seen in 20 years. The man was Silas Blackwood, his father, and the picture was dated, scrawled on the back in an unfamiliar hand. Providence, 1965. In 1965, Silas Blackwood had been married to Elias' mother, Cecily, and had claimed to be on a business trip to London that lasted 6 weeks. A trip that now appeared to have been a lie. Elias stared at the picture, the world tilting. Was this why Evelyn had taken the ledger? Not to steal, but to expose? Was this woman the secret, the true Blackwood curse? And where was she now? Where was Evelyn? The answer, he knew, were tied up in that $50 million trust and the silent history of Silas' lies. He ripped the photo free, the old tape tearing like a gasp. That could shatter the very foundation of Blackwood Manor. Providence, 1965. Documented in a grainy square of photo paper hidden in the very desk, where he had signed the documents that locked his family into a gilded cage. Elias shoved the picture into the breast pocket of his tweed jacket, the sharp corner pressing against his heart. He didn't want to show this to Cecelia. Not yet. Cecelia managed her world by knowing its boundaries. This picture meant the boundaries had been illusory for decades. He needed Thorne, not the detective who was officially searching for a missing person, but the man who was likely sitting in a cold car, waiting for the Blackwood facade to crack. Elias found Thorne down by the wrought iron gate, talking to a uniformed officer. The sound of traffic on the distant state road a low, constant hum. Thorne turned his gaze slow, taking the change in Elias' posture. The man was usually coiled. Now he was slack, defeated. Elias held out the photograph. The past detective, not the present. Elias held out the photograph. Thorne took it, his gloved fingers surprisingly gentle on the brittle paper. He studied the smiling, younger Silas Blackwood and the defiant young woman on the trawler. This man is your father pre-heart attack. Who is the woman? I don't know. The date on the back is 1965. My father was supposedly in London on business. This looks like a port, perhaps Rhode Island as the inscription suggests. Thorne flipped the photo, looking at the faded cursive. Providence, 1965. A fishing vessel. 2. Not the usual backdrop for a London banking trip. He looked up at Elias, the realization dawning slowly. Elias nodded, the admission heavy in the freezing air. This is why the ledger is gone, detective. She wasn't running from the trust. She was running with the evidence to find this woman, or perhaps a child of this woman, a half-sibling. The stakes, Thorne realized, had just vaulted into the ionosphere. If Silas had a child outside of his marriage, a child born years before the trust was finalized, that child might have a legitimate claim to a share of the estate. And given Silas's vindictive nature, he might have even written the will with secret clause, banking on Evelina, the only one he vaguely trusted to execute a final, posthumous twist of the knife. The trust is $50 million, Mr. Blackwood. If a legal challenge is successful, the current heiress you and your brothra could be left with significantly less. We need to find out who this woman is. The ledger must contain details about her, about the venture fund. My father kept secrets about money. Always, if he was hiding a family, he was hiding the funds to support them. Thorne handed the photo back. I can't track down every trawler in Providence from 1965, but I can start with the Blackwood Company records. If your father moved money secretly, it would have been a shell company, a subsidiary. We're looking for a paper trail that leads to the sea. And Evelyn, if Shea's trying to track down a half-sibling, she would need to start where her father started. And if she took the venture fund coordinates, she needs capital. We're looking for a woman with a picture, a stolen ledger, and perhaps access to a significant sum of cash. Shea's not missing Mr. Blackwood. Shea's hunting. Back inside the manor, the atmosphere was thick and cold. Cecelia was in the library on the phone, her voice tightly controlled. Elias knew she was calling the family lawyers, spinning the story, and trying to preempt the inevitable legal earthquake. He bypassed her, heading toward the less-used East Winga relic of the Victorian era, filled with old Cervantes quarters and storage. He needed to be alone. He needed to think about the $50 million. He needed to think about the venture fund. The name had always been a ghost, a file that had disappeared from the Blackwood accounting books in the mid-70s. A chunk of money, estimated at maybe $810 million, that had simply evaporated. Silas had always dismissed inquiries, claiming it was a failed overseas investment that was completely liquidated. Elias now knew that was another lie. He stopped in the hallway outside the old nursery, a room that hadn't seen a child in 50 years. He remembered his mother, Cecily, a woman hollowed out by her marriage, clinging to the social status the name provided. Had she known about this other woman? Teddy stood in the shadows, holding a fresh glass of amber liquid, his eyes clear for first time in days, but sharp with a predatory focus. Teddy, I told you I need space. Looking for a quiet place to panic. Elias? No, you need a partner. And you need to stop treating this like a legal problem and start treating it like a Blackwood problem, Teddy said, taking a slow sip. Cecelia is calling the sharks. I'm offering a lifeboat. Elias hesitated. Teddy was unreliable, a black sheep, but he was also ruthless and, unlike Cecelia, didn't view Elias as merely the guardian of her fortune. Evelyn didn't run away, Teddy. She was collecting evidence. Our father had a second life, a woman, in Providence, 1965. Teddy didn't flinch. He walked closer, his gaze sweeping the ornate, dusty hallway. You think I didn't know something was up? Silas was a monster, but he was a meticulous monster. He took trips, long ones. He never brought back souvenirs for Mother, not once. But I remember once I was 9. I found a small, smooth gray stone in his coat pocket. Not a common stone. It had flecks of mica in it, the kind you find near a specific coastal quarry, where he told me it was from a factory yard in London. But I looked it up later as a kid, obsessed with geology. That specific mica-fleck granite, it comes from the coast of Maine, north of Providence, but on the same eastern seaboard. The ledger must point to a location, the venture fund, Teddy. If that money exists, Ida as funding the search, or Ida as funding a whole other life. Then we don't wait for Thorne and his paper trail. We follow the main stone. Evelyn is not a detective. She's a scholar. She'd start with the facts, the known names. But Silas? He'd hide the real key in a story, an object, the stone. Ida essay clue. Elias looked at his brother. The failed poet turned amateur sleuth, and saw a flicker of the old Blackwood determination, a dark, pragmatic will to survive. We need to be one step ahead of her, Teddy, before she finds a half-sibling, and the trust lawyers turn this family into a public circus, and before Thorne finds a venture fund. Agreed. You handle the manor, the police, the official eyes. I'll take a trip. I'll find the town where the stone came from. If this woman was real, she lived somewhere. And in that town, Evelyn might have left a trace. A hotel register, a fuel receipt, a purchase of a new scarf. Something. As Teddy turned to head back downstairs, his plan already forming. Elias's mind raced forward. Maine, the coast, quarry, a small, anonymous town. The Blackwood secrets were finally leaving the manor, and Elias suddenly realized a true horror. Evelyn wasn't just exposing Silas's past. She was building a future that excluded them completely. A future possibly shared with a complete stranger who might inherit the entire Blackwood legacy. Teddy Blackwood was gone by dawn, taking the '68 Jaguar, a car as unreliable and flashy as he was, and heading north toward the promise of mica-fleck granite. He carried the Providence photograph in a pocket full of untraceable cash, operating on instinct and the sheer, desperate need to prove his worth. Elias, left to manage the implosion at Blackwood Manor, had a harder task, managing Detective Thorne. Thorne returned mid-morning, not with uniformed officers, but with a woman in a severe gray suit and sensible shoes, an FBI liaison specializing in financial crimes. The involvement of the feds was Elias's worst nightmare. It meant the scale of the money involved Veda, the $50 million trust, and the rumored venture funda had triggered a national alarm. Mr. Blackwood, the photograph has changed the nature of this inquiry. We're now investigating potential fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering dating back 20 years, related to the late Silas Blackwood and his assets. The disappearance of your sister is now inextricably linked to the venture fund. Agent Sharma spoke, her voice precise, cutting through the manor's oppressive silence. The initial investigation into the trust structure revealed irregularities. The venture fund never appeared on any audited Blackwood balance sheets. It appears to be a separate, parallel entity, possibly funded by untaxed profits or illicit activities. We believe this fund may not be liquidated, but merely dormant, with its assets transferred offshore. And we believe your sister may have the access codes. Elias maintained his calm, a learned skill in the Blackwood dynasty. My sister was an accountant, agent. She was meticulous, but not a criminal mastermind. She was likely trying to access funds to hire a private investigator to confirm this discovery. Or she was trying to secure her future by eliminating the possibility of a challenge to her inheritantia challenge that a half-sibling, supported by a secret fund, would certainly represent. We need the location of the venture fund account, and that agent is in the ledger my sister stole. I don't have the codes. I don't have the details. My father went to great lengths to ensure only Evelyn could access the full history. The conversation was a delicate, high-stakes dance, but Elias felt the ground shifting beneath him. The presence of the FBI meant his control over the narrative was dissolving. Meanwhile, Teddy had crossed into Maine, the Jaguar shuddering slightly as it ate up the asphalt. He drove slowly and methodically, looking for towns with a specific geological signature he remembered read a coastal rocky and containing a disused granite quarry or dockyard. He stopped at a diner in a town called Crescent Harbor, a place that smelled of salt, fried fish, and faded hope. the type of place that had secrets baked into its infrastructure. He showed the white tress of a woman whose face suggested she'd seen every piece of drama the town had produced the photograph. He pitched the story of a long-lost college roommate. Looking for Eleanor, I think her name was that summer, trying to track her down for a reunion. Trawlers named the C. Scrivener, belonged to the Petrov family, used to dock right here, before they sold it off in the 70s. And the woman, Eleanor, the waitress shook her head slowly. Donatino and Eleanor. But that girl, she looks like a Lydia. Lydia Petrov. Dark hair. Always had that look-alike she knew a secret. Left town around 68, I think. Went down to Providence for a while. Maybe Lydia Petrov, not Eleanor. A real name. A Russian surname. Suggesting old fishing families and a connection to the sea trade. That Silas, a shipping magnate, would have easily leveraged. Teddy's pulse quickened. He ordered a coffee, and, after the waitress moved away, pulled out the copy of the Providence photo. On the back, underneath Providence, 1965, he now wrote, Lydia Petrov. He stayed for hours, talking to the locals, buying a round of beers at the nearby dockside bar, piecing together the ghost of Lydia Petrov. The details were sparse. She was the daughter of a local captain. She was fiercely independent. She left town abruptly and never came back. No one remembered a child. But one old fisherman, after 3 whiskeys, remembered a specific date from 1983. Last winter, a woman was asking about Lydia. The fisherman mumbled, eyes glazed over. Polite, bookish type. Asked about the Petrov Homia, the one out on the old Headlands Road, before the new development took over. Said she was a history student, tracking local families. Asked about the house. Asked about Lydia's letters that the family kept. November 1983. Exactly the time frame of Evelina's disappearance. Evelyn Wasn't running to Providence. She was running from the manor, armed with the photo and the ledger, and was working backward to find the last known point of contact. The Petrov home in Crescent Harbor. She had been here. She had been asking about Lydia's letters. Teddy rushed out, adrenaline surging. He drove out to the old Headlands Road, finding the derelict house where the Petrovs had lived. It was slated for demolition, fenced off, but the fence was loose. He slipped inside the perimeter, finding the house dark, hollow, and freezing. The main rooms were stripped bare. But Teddy, channeling his father's obsessive detail, didn't look high. He looked low. In the corner of the former parlor, near the fireplace mantel, he saw it. A single, fresh cigarette butt of the brand Evelyn occasionally smoked when under extreme stress. The brand Evelyn occasionally smoked when under extreme stress. It was too modern to be from the 60s, too fresh to be a discarded relic. She had been here, and she had spent time searching. But what had she been looking for? The letters? Teddy moved into the kitchen. The linoleum was cracked, but the old, built-in pantry had a false back for storing valuables during storms. He pushed on the wood panel. It shifted. Inside, beneath a few cobweb-covered jars, was a small, dusty wooden box. He pulled it out. He opened the lid. It wasn't Lydia's love letters to Silas. It was something far more damning. The box contained a few items: a baby silver rattle, tarnished and forgotten, a manila envelope sealed with wax, and a key. Not the trust key, but a large old-fashioned skeleton key etched with the number 404. He tore open the manila envelope. Inside were documents that instantly confirmed his worst fears. A birth certificate for a boy named Jonas Petrov, born in Crescent Harbor in 1966, listing the father as Silas Blackwood of Ames Creek. The half-sibling was real, and he was a son, but the key of the key etched with 404, it was a true prize. The number wasn't a room number. It was an account designation. He suddenly remembered a fleeting mention in Salasa as private notes, years ago, concerning a safe deposit box tied to the venture fund, kept in an old, independent bank in New York City where Silas conducted personal, untraceable transactions. Box 404. Evelyn had come here, found this box, and taken only the most critical piece of evidence. What was it? The money? The ledger? Teddy noticed a manila envelope was slightly ripped on the inside. He shook it, and a small, folded piece of paper, a page from the Blackwood ledger, drifted out. It was not the entire ledger, but a single ripped-out page. And scrawled across it, in Evelyn S. precise hand, was a sequence of alphanumeric codes next to the header. A Venture Fund. Access and coordinates to A. Teddy held the page, the key, and the proof of his half-brother in his hands. He had found the truth. Evelyn had left the birth certificate, knowing the legal battle would stall his family. But she had taken the key to the Munya, the venture fund coordinatisa, to finance the next step. She hadn't expected him to find this hidden box, or the existence of the single missing page. He had the money, he had the power, and he knew exactly where to go next. New York City, Box 404. Teddy's drive to New York City was fueled by the sudden, intoxicating rush of having the venture fund access codes. The Jaguar smelled faintly of seawater and stale brandy, but he barely noticed. He wasn't the drunken wastrel anymore. He was a man holding the secret key, the man who had outmaneuvered his sharp-minded sister and his cautious brother. He clutched the single, torn ledger page. Venture fund, access and coordinates, a sequence of numbers and letters, a Swiss bank routing key, and a date, November 28, 1983, the day after Evelyn had disappeared. Silas Blackwood had been a man who trusted no one, not even his favored daughter. He had split the keys, the physical key, Teddy's Box 404 skeleton key, for access to the hidden documents, and the digital keys, Evelyn S. codes, to initiate the transfer. Teddy realized what Evelyn S. move had been. She had gone to the Petrov house in Crescent Harbor, retrieved the documents and the skeleton key, and then used the skeleton key to access the bank box, where she found a final, crucial ledger page. She had only ripped off the page with the access codes, leaving the rest of the documents of the birth certificate, the skeleton key, to be found as a distraction. She wanted them to find a legal problem, Jonas Petrov, while she focused on the cash, the venture fund. He arrived in Manhattan. The city wore a stark contrast to the manor's silence. The bank was called the Fidelity and Trust of New York, a squat, imposing building. He presented the key and his ID to the vault manager, an ancient, wizened man with a suspicious eye. Box 404. The manager consulted a heavy ledger. Ah, the Blackwood box. Transferred from the late Mr. Silas Blackwood to Ms. Evelyn Blackwood upon her 21st birthday. He looked at Teddy S.I.D. You are not Ms. Blackwood. My sister is incapacitated, and there are legal concerns regarding the ownership of these assets. I have court orders being prepared. For now, I'm authorized to examine the contents of the box for immediate inventory as the co-heir, and I have the physical key. It was a bold-faced lie, but the manager, sensing the Blackwood pressure and seeing the undeniable proof of Silas' secrets, relented. He escorted Teddy into the vault. The box was heavy. Teddy unlocked it and lifted the lid. Inside, it was mostly empty. He found only two things. One, a stack of old maritime bills of sale, linking the purchase of several large, decommissioned fishing trawlers, including the sea scrivener back to the Blackwood Corporation in the late 1960s. A single, thin, yellowed envelope, sealed with a small, plain S wax seal. Inside was a letter, dated November 29th, 1983, the day after the transfer coordinates were notated, addressed to Evelyn Blackwood in Silas's distinctive, harsh script. Silas was dead, yet here was a final message, delivered by an unseen hand. My dearest Evelyn. Teddy's hands trembled as he broke the brittle seal. If you are reading this, you discovered the truth, as I intended you eventually would. The trust was never about rewarding your loyalty. It was about ensuring the survival of the bloodline I truly cared about. The $50 million goes to my son, Jonas Petrov, but only when he reaches his 30th year, with you as the interim guardian. You've taken the venture fund codes. You believe you're funding a search for him, but Jonas doesn't need to be found. He is operating under an assumed name, using the initial capital I gave his mother, Lydia, before she died 5 years ago. He is building his own legacy, one free of the Blackwood name's rot. The venture fund cash is your payment, Evelyn. Your reward for doing the right thing. Use it to disappear. Never find Jonas. Never bring him back to the manor. If you expose him, I will ensure the full $50 million goes to a charity, leaving you and your brothers with nothing but the decaying walls of the manor. You have until January 1st, 1984, when the first coded message will be released to Jonas, telling him to surface and claim the full trust, regardless of your actions. If you haven't vanished by then, I will destroy everything. Teddy dropped the letter on the floor of the vault. The silence was deafening. The entire Blackwood trust of the fortune they were fighting over was actually a legacy intended for a half-brother Theodore just discovered. And Evelyn hadn't stolen the code to find him. She had stolen him to obey their dead father's final command and simply disappear, leaving the manor to collapse. But the letter revealed something more. Jonas Petrov was operating under an assumed name, and Silas had a timeline. January 1st, 1984. Teddy scooped up the letter and the codes. He had the money now, or at least the access to initiate the wire transfer from the Swiss account. He had the leverage. Evelyn was following Silas's wishes. Teddy, was following his own. He immediately went to a payphonia. He didn't trust the Jaguar's phonia and called Elias at the manor. Don't say anything to Cecelia or Thorn. Elias's voice was a low growl over the crackling line. A half-brother? You're certain? Silas left a letter. A final instruction. Evelyn found it. She took the venture fund money, almost $10 million, as a payment to disappear and never bring Jonas into family mess. If she fails, or if we interfere, Silas voids a trust and the money goes to charity. A void clause. That bastard. He built the company and then rigged it to destroy us. Where is Evelyn now? What is her next move? The letter mentions a coded message going out to Jonas on January 1st, 1984, telling him to surface. Evelyn is probably trying to find him before that date, not to expose him, but to convince him to wait, to remain hidden, to buy her time to disappear. She's not trying to stop the inheritance. She's trying to save the inheritance for him, while saving herself from us. And what about you, Teddy? You have the codes. You have the $10 million. Teddy felt a chill. The real test of the Blackwood blood. I have the codes to the venture fund, but the money hasn't moved yet. Evelyn only prepared the transfer. I can initiate it now. But Elias, we need to forget about the $10 million for a second. We need to focus on Jonas. If he surfaces on January 1st, the lawyers will descend, the trust will be settled, and we will be sidelined. So what do? We follow Evelyn. She's looking for a man who is actively hiding, running a small business likely related to the sea or travel. She'll need to contact him before January 1st. And she needs a messenger. And she needs to do it quietly, without alerting Jonas that his guardian is about to run. I have the codes. You handle Thorn. I am coming back to the manor now. We combine forces. We find Jonas Petrov, and we make him a better offer than Evelina as silence. We pay him to stay hidden until we can void that charitable clause. Come back, Teddy. Fast. Thorn's digging into the company's maritime accounts. He is closing in on the old sea Scrivener sales. And Cecelia just hired a private investigator to track your movements. This is no longer a search for a sister. It's a race against a new year to find a phantom brother. Teddy hung up the phone. He initiated the wire transfer to a holding account and not to run, but to seize control. He now had the power to make Jonas Petrov an offer he couldn't refuse. He was driving back to Blackwood Manor, no longer a supplicant, but a warlord, armed with the money, the secret, and the knowledge that every move they made was choreographed by their dead, brilliant father. The engine roaring a counterpoint to the nervous energy coiling in his gut. He wasn't just bringing back a secret. He was bringing back a lot of cash to the venture funda, and with it, a temporary yet absolute parity with Elias. He found Elias in the library, not reading, but staring at the flickering embers in the fireplace where the ledger safe was concealed. Elias looked up, his face a mask of exhaustion and calculation. Cecelia was nowhere in sight of a small mercy. Thorn is on the sea Scrivener. He pulled the old sales records. He knows the boat was owned by the Petrovs and bought by a Blackwood shell company. He's working on the assumption that Silas Blackwood kept the boat and maybe the half-brother on a shadow payroll somewhere. Let him, Teddy said, dropping the skeleton key and the single ledger page onto the antique desk. Elias picked up the page, his eyes scanning the Swiss routing codes. Elias picked up the page, his eyes scanning the Swiss routing codes. You initiated the transfer? The $10 million is secure? Ida S in a holding account, only accessible to me. The lie about accessibility, a necessary shield. We control the leverage now. But we have a deadline, January 1st. That's only a few weeks away. Evelyn will try to contact Jonas before the coded message alerts him to surface. We need to find her contact first. Elias pushed the keys and the page back to Teddy. Teddy leaned against the marble mantel, thinking aloud. Not a phone call. Too traceable. Not a telegram. Too public. Not a lawyer Theodore reported. She would use someone reliable, someone outside the Blackwood orbit, a third party, a middleman, a messenger. Who doesn't know what they're carrying, only where they are going? Someone she trusts, but who isn't connected to Manor's immediate circle. Think, Teddy. Who did Evelyn keep close that we rarely saw? Teddy remembered the late-night phone calls Evelyn used to take in conservatory, her voice low and guarded. There was the editor, Wallace Croft. She was publishing articles on maritime history, trying to validate the C. Scrivener records, I think. She always spoke highly of him, said he was the only one who didn't treat her like a porcelain doll. Croft, the editor of a Northeast historical journal. In Boston, that's Evelyn's base. She would have visited him recently, perhaps to hand off her final, untraceable message. If she went to Croft, she wouldn't have handed him the location of Jonas. She would have given him something innocuous, a final manuscript, a historical documenta with a hidden message inside, a cipher only Jonas would recognize, related to his real family history. Elias was already dialing. I'll call my contact at the Boston Bank and get the address for the journal offices. You'll drive up now. The city rental car Evelyn used, the one the fisherman mentioned, that must be sitting somewhere near Croft's offices or her apartment. She wanted T have taken the Jaguar. Wait, Teddy cut in, a sudden, dark suspicion crossing his face. If she gave him a document, then Croft isn't just a messenger. He's the current custodian of the key to Jonas. We can't just ask him. We have to take it. Then you go to Boston, Teddy, find Croft, retrieve the message before he sends it. Don't engage the police. And absolutely do not involve Cecelia. Teddy was back on the road before the sun rose, heading north again, this time toward Boston. He reached Boston by mid-afternoon, the city dense and gray. He found the Northeast Historical Journal offices tucked away above a dusty bookstore in a quiet, historic district. The office hours were long over. He needed to confirm if Evelyn had been here recently. He drove to her old apartment, Buildinga, a tasteful, brownstone relic in Beacon Hill. The apartment was dark, untouched, but as he circled the back alley, he saw it, parked discreetly, covered in a thin layer of grit, was a small, light blue Ford Tempo, a model easily rented and easily forgotten. The same model the fisherman had described. Evelyn was not far. He checked the car. Unlocked. Evelyn was always fastidious, which meant she had been in a hurry, or she left it open deliberately, a final, careless gesture before vanishing for good. He opened the glove compartment. Inside, he found a handful of quarter-sized toll receipts of Massachusetts Turnpike, dated from 2 days ago, and a folded street map of Boston. The map was a crucial piece. A specific block of north end of Boston's oldest districta was heavily circled in a sharp red pencil. The circle encompassed a small, historic building labeled the Seamen's Exchange. Not Wallace Croft's office. A new location. Teddy recognized the name. The Seamen's Exchange was an old, private maritime club, a place where shipping captains, naval officers, and historical researchers often met. It was private, exclusive, and most importantly, unmonitored by the public eye. She hadn't gone to Cross office. She had met him at the exchange. Teddy drove to the north end. The Seamen's Exchange was a narrow, Three-story building, dark wood and old brick. It looked like a place built on secrets. He needed to get inside without setting off an alarm. He found a side door marked Delivery Entrance, secured by a heavy brass latch and a simple barrel bolt. Using a thin piece of metal he had scavenged from the Jaguar S toolkit, he worked the lock, the cold metal biting his fingers. Quiet click was all the warning he got. He slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather, stale tobacco, and salt water. He was in a dimly lit hallway. He moved toward the main lounge, hearing a faint rhythmic clack-clack-clack sound. He peered around the corner of suit of armora, a ridiculous piece of ornamentation. In the center of the lounge, sitting alone at a massive mahogany table, was a man in a tweed jacket with an intensely focused expression. Wallace Croft. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was operating a small, portable telex machine. Clack, clack, clack. Teddy moved fast, crossing the heavy Persian rug in 3 silent strides. He slammed his hand down on the telex machine, silencing the clatter. Croft looked up, startled, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Wallace Croft, editor of the Journal. This is private correspondence. Blackwood. My clienta. This is private correspondence. Blackwood. My clienta. Your client is my sister, Evelyn Blackwood. She's disappeared, and you are unwittingly helping her destroy her family. What is that message? It is a coded dedication, a quote from an old sailing treatise, which she asked me to send to a specific P.O. box in the Pacific Northwest. A farewell message to a research partner, she said. A farewell message, or the final clue to a $50 million trust, or the final clue to a $50 million trust. Croft, I have the venture-funded $10 million. If you cooperate, the money is yours. If you don't, I let the FBI know you were the last person to illegally transmit a coded financial message from a missing person. The threat was a bluff, but the mention of the $10 million hit home. He slowly uncrumpled the sheet. It wasn't a bank code. It was a single line of text written in a specific, obscure dialect of old maritime jargon. The anchor drops only where the tide is turned twice. See the sign of the mariner's compass in the western harbor. It's a dedication from a copy of the Seaman's Guide to Safe Harbor. Croft explained, his voice shaking. Evelyn-esque research was focused on the Pacific Northwest, specifically the decline of small logging towns. Teddy snatched the paper. Pacific Northwest. Jonas Petrov was not a Boston academic. He was somewhere on the West Coast, possibly continuing his family's maritime legacy, or Silas's hidden business. The P.O. box number. Croft whispered the 6 digits. She told me to send it to the Port Bliss Post Office, General Delivery, in the name of J. Mason. J. Mason, Jonas Petrov's assumed name. The J for Jonas, and Mason a stoneworker, perhaps a nod to the granite from Crescent Harbor. Teddy now had the code, the name, and the location. The name and the location. He had caught up to Evelyn's timeline. He left Croft trembling by the telex machine, the $10 million bribia apromasia hanging in the air. He drove the Jaguar onto the nearest highway, heading back south to rally Elias. Port Bliss, Washington, a small town with a general delivery mailbox. He knew Jonas Petrov was about to receive a cryptic message meant to tell him to disappear. And Teddy knew that if he reached Port Bliss first, he could send his own message to Jonas Petrov. The Blackwoods have a better offer. The plan solidified during Teddy's punishing, high-speed drive back to Blackwood Manor. They wouldn't fly. Air travel was traceable, and Elias's movements were already being watched by Thorne and Agent Sharma. They would take the Blackwood private train car, a relic of Silas' successes, stored on a private spur linea, a fast, untraceable route west, fueled and provisioned on short notice. When Teddy arrived, Elias was waiting in the library, the glow of a single brass lamp illuminating his tense face. The glow of a single brass lamp illuminating his tense face. Port Bliss, Washington, a perfect place for a man to build a life free of the Blackwood name. Evelina S. Messagia. Anchor drops only where the tide is turned twice. It's meant to tell Jonas to hold fast, to stay hidden until after the January 1st deadline, giving her time to vanish with the venture fund. We need to intercept him before he gets the message, or at least before he acts on it. We need to get there first and make him a counteroffer. We need to go off the grid. Elias decided, his voice hardening with resolve. I've instructed the staff to tell Thorne that I retreated to the upstate hunting lodge for quiet reflection. Cecelia will handle the lawyers and the media spinning that lie. She is, fortunately, entirely focused on making me look like the wounded family patriarch. The private car hasn't been used since father died. It's a risk. It's a necessary risk. The Silas Blackwood car is a rolling fortress. We'll be in Seattle within 3 days. From there, we hire local transport to Port Bliss. The venture fund. You still have the transfer control? Yes, and the codes are secure. That $10 million is the only thing Jonas will care about. Elias, not the $50 million trust he can't touch for years. Elias picked up the old heavy train schedule book, its pages brittle with age. $2 million to stay hidden. You become practical, Teddy. I like it. Now we move. As they were preparing to leave, loading briefcases containing cash reserves and emergency documents, the house phone rang. Answer it, Teddy urged. It might be Cecelia, giving us a final cover story. Elias picked up the receiver. Blackwood Manor. It wasn't Cecelia. It was Detective Thorne. His voice was colder, more pointed than before. Mr. Blackwood, I've just received a preliminary report from Agent Sharma's team in New York. They found bank records that indicate a wire transfer of a substantial amount approaching $10 million to Larsa, from a specific Swiss account associated with the venture fund to an offshore holding entity. The transfer was initiated late yesterday. The transfer was executed using an access code that was, according to bank security notes, registered to your sister, Evelyn. However, the initiation point was traced to a payphone kiosk near the Fidelity and Trust in downtown Manhattan. Roughly an hour after your brother, Theodore, was seen leaving the building after accessing safety deposit box 404. The silence on the line was brutal. Thorne wasn't guessing. He was stating facts. Detective, Elias managed, his voice controlled but razor thin. My brother was assisting the investigation, tracking down a lead regarding the disposition of my father's assets. He found the access codes and secured the funds against further risk. I understand, Mr. Blackwood, but securing stolen property without reporting it and failing to mention your brother's trip to New York raises significant legal concerns, particularly regarding the $10 million in question. I am now treating the venture fund as stolen assets and Theodore as a person of interest. That's an outrageous accusation, Detective. Perhaps. But where's Theodore now, Mr. Blackwood? And where were you planning to go when your staff reported your unexpected request for the activation of the Blackwood private rail car? He knows about the money and the train. Sharma's team is faster than we anticipated. He knows we're rerunning. We're not running, Elias. We're intercepting a half-brother before January 1st. We're just traveling fast. Thorne doesn't have enough to stop us. Not with a warrant. He will. He just needs a few hours. Elias looked at the clock. It was 11:30 p.m. We need to be on that train and miles away before dawn. The Blackwood rail car, an ornate relic of mahogany and velvet, was waiting on the private spur, the engine hissing impatiently, casting long, dramatic shadows. As they approached the car, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Cecelia. She was wearing a thick fur coat, her expression a mix of fury and ice. Going somewhere, gentlemen? To the hunting lodge? Or perhaps a little cross-country journey to secure the family legacy without informing the family's senior member? Elias stepped forward. Cecelia, this is not the time. We are chasing a lead that could save the entire trust. A half-brother. Silas' illegitimate son, Jonas Petrov. Cecelia didn't flinch. She was less surprised by the news of Silas' infidelity than she was by her husband's attempt to keep the solution from her. The half-brother who inherits the trust? The one you were hoping to sideline with the venture fund? I suspected something. Your sudden secrecy, Teddy's disappearance, and the look in your eyes. So, while you two were playing detectives, I was ensuring my own future. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, heavy object. It was a Beretta pistol, gleaming dully in the reflected light of the train car's single, lonely lantern. I called the trust lawyers, Elias. I told them about the void clause. And I told them that the only way to avoid the trust money going to charity is to prove that Evelyn is incapacitated or legally dead before the January 1st deadline, thus triggering the inheritance to flow to the remaining heirs immediately. Teddy felt a sickening drop in his stomach. Silas S. was only concerned about Evelyn's interference. If Evelyn is removed, the trust passes to the legal heir, which is Jonas. But the lawyers I spoke to are my lawyers. They are prepared to argue that if Evelyn's status is permanently unresolved veda, if she has simply vanished without proof of life or death, the inheritance defaults to the next living blood relative of Silas. That's you, Elias. And by marriage, that's me. She had planned this meticulously. And how are you planning to achieve that? Cecelia? By ensuring your little trip is a one-way venture. I've already arranged for the line switch to be set for the old quarry spur 100 miles from Heiress, a dead end. And when the train fails to stop and the car plunges into the ravine, the venture fund code will be lost with Teddy, and you, Elias, will finally be free of your brother's ineptitude and Silas's curse. She took aim, the muzzle steady. The Blackwoods will get to Headland Nisa a tragic accident, securing the insurance payout and removing the biggest threats to my legal strategy. Jonas Petrov will remain a ghost, and the manor will belong to me. You won't get away with this. I already have. The police think you're upstate. The lawyers think you're protecting the legacy. And the venture fund is about to become a pile of ash. She pulled the trigger. The sound was sharp, deafening in the yard. The crack of the pistol shot was sharp, a violent punctuation mark in the cold night air. But it wasn't Elias or Teddy who went down. As Cecelia squeezed the trigger, Teddy, fueled by panic and instinct, shoved Elias hard toward the train car. The bullet tore through the heavy air where Elias's chest had been a millisecond before, slamming into the mahogany exterior of the private car with a dull thud and a spray of splinters. Get on the train. Elias, stunned but alive, stumbled up the steps. Cecelia fired a second time. The shot, missing the moving targets, impacting the brick wall of the coal yard behind them. Teddy reached the cab, throwing open the heavy steel door. The Blackwood train engineer, an old man named Frank, stared at them horrified, already pulling the throttle. Go. Frank, maximum speed. Don't slow down for the main line. Slamming the cab door shut and locking it, Elias collapsed onto the plush velvet seating in the main compartment. His hand pressed against the splintered wood where the first bullet had hit. I heard her. Teddy gasped, pulling himself to his feet. He was shaking, not from fear, but from the brutal proximity of death. The train surged forward, the rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels accelerating rapidly, devouring the miles. Elias ran into the cab, shoving Teddy aside. Frank, his face pale, shook his head violently. Too fast, Mr. Blackwood. We've already passed the switch point. I saw the indicator light a red. We re on the spur. Ida S downhill from here. We stop now. The brakes will melt. Teddy grabbed the map tube and unrolled an ancient, yellow track diagram. The Granite Creek spur was a decommissioned line built for Silas's granite trade, ending abruptly at a cliff overlooking a deep ravine. The mariner's compass. The granite. The final, terrible, physical link to Crescent Harbor and Lydia Petrov. How far is the cliff? Frank consulted his gauges. We need to slow down and jump. No. Elias decided, his voice stealing. He grabbed the emergency radio microphone, flicking the power switch. Teddy, where did you say Jonas was? Port Bliss, Washington. We're going to find a way to get off this train and get to Port Bliss. Cecelia just forced our hand. The mariner's compass, Elias. Croft's coded message. See the sign of the mariner's compass in the western harbor. That's not just a location in Port Bliss. It's a marker. The Granite Creek spur is a quarry. It's a harbor of stone. Elias looked at the map, then out the window at the blackness flashing by. Silas's final message to Evelyn. He was so meticulous. The granite quarry, the same stone from the coast of Mania, was the initial clue, and now it's our death trap. Cecelia thought she was clever, but she's just playing into our father's twisted narrative. We can't stop the train, but we can slow it. We need to jump before it goes over the edge. If we jump now, we risk breaking our legs and being found by Thorne. He grabbed a sledgehammer stored in the corner of the cab for emergency repairs. We don't jump. We survive. The car is designed for crashes. Teddy, we have 5 minutes. Get every valuable, every piece of paper, and every cash reserve into the strongest suitcase. We ride this out, and then we disappear into the woods. Frank, the engineer, shook his head. It's been an honor. Elias nodded, a flash of respect for the old man. Elias and Teddy raced back into the passenger compartment, a desperate flurry of activity. They secured the briefcase containing the venture fund access page and the remaining cash. Teddy yelled, "Where's the emergency kit?" Behind the bar. They found the key to bandages, flashlights, and a thick, heavy-duty maritime radio. Elias grabbed the radio, disconnecting its antenna. We need to send a message. Teddy, a different message. Not to Jonas, but to the world. We need to create a smokescreen. Elias explained, dragging the radio toward the back platform door. The train rattled violently as it hit a sharp curve. They were only minutes from the end of the line. Elias unlocked the door to the small observation platform at the rear of the car. The wind whipped past, a violent, freezing roar. He connected the maritime radio to the backup antenna. Cecelia wants us to be declared unresolved to take the estate. Thorne is looking for stolen money. We give them what they want, but on our terms. Elias rapidly keyed in a message sequence on the radio, targeting the local Coast Guard frequency. I'm sending out a distress signal, Teddy, claiming a Blackwood vessel is in trouble off the New England coast. We're going to use the Jonas Petrov backstory against the family. The text message scrolled across the radio display. Mayday, this is the F/VC Scrivener. Engaged. We have a fire in the galley. Need immediate evacuation. Location, 43.12N, 70.88W. Elias Blackwood on board. The coordinates he used were entirely falsia the middle of the Atlantic, miles from any land. Cecelia thinks we died in a train crash upstate. Thorne will think we've taken a boat and are sinking in the Atlantic with the cash. It throws them both into a frenzy of confusion and gives us the hours we need. Teddy looked at his brother, seeing not the cautious accountant, but a man finally driven to ruthlessness. It's a perfect lie. It links us to the boat, to the Petrov family, and makes us both missing per Sansa, but missing at sea, not on land. The final curve. The brakes were shrieking, the metal vibrating violently. Now we brace, throwing the radio out into the night, destroying the evidence. They scrambled into the cramped luggage closet, the strongest point of the car, slamming the steel door shut just as the train car flew off into the rails. The sound was not a crash. It was a devastating tear. The sound of nothing but wind and the tearing of metal. Then the impact, a grinding, wrenching shudder that slammed them against the steel walls. The car tumbled end over end down the steep incline, everything inside shattering. When the violent movement finally stopped, there was only the dripping of fluid, the creak of settling metal, and the eerie, ringing silence of the forest night. Elias pushed open the closet door, gasping for breath, tasting blood and dust. The car was lying on its side, the front half crumpled against a massive granite boulder, the foundation of the old quarry. Teddy, are you I'm here. He was bruised, but miraculously intact. He clutched the briefcase of the one containing the venture fund code DESA to his chest. They climbed out of wreck and stumbled into the frozen woods. The private car grotesque, smoking ruin against a granite cliff. They were alive, but they were now ghosts, missing persons at sea, accused thieves on land. Their every asset, their every identity now invalid. They had nothing but the clothes on their backs, the cash in the briefcase, and the knowledge of where to go next. We move west. Cecelia thinks we re-dead. Thorne thinks we re-sinking. We have exactly 2 days to cross the country and reach Port Bliss before the new year and Jonas Petrov's coded message. The race to the Pacific Northwest just began.